Evaluating validity using an example of searching for a good doctor. By now she is famous worldwide. Maria van Kerkhove, technical lead at the WHO, an infectious disease epidemiologist. She made a statement Monday, June 8th that asymptomatic spread of coronavirus is rare. Very rare. As you know, there's a lot of debate about this, and Dr. Fauci finally came out and said she was wrong. But how is a normal person supposed to evaluate her statement? How would someone who isn't an epidemiologist know whether she is speaking out of her butt or not? Let's go back to how you evaluate the validity of a statement in general. When somebody else says something, how do you know it's true? Well, let's change it around to something I know a little bit about. How do you find a good doctor? You want to find a doctor who knows their stuff, right? Who doesn't just say stuff and the next they tell you, oops, I guess that was not correct. You may want to go deeper than just looking at how pretty they are, how nice their suit is. This is Mayo Clinic where doctors always wear suits to work. The first thing you want to know is their credentials. Background. Let's say you want to find an internal medicine doctor. You go to your insurance website and it gives you a list. When you click on them, it gives you some more information about the individual. It talks about her medical background in this case. She went to Stanford University as an undergraduate, then University of California Irvine Medical School, then did her residency at Santa Clara Valley Medical Center. You may not know much about these places, but I can tell you that Stanford's a pretty good school to go to, so it's surprising she went to UC Irvine, which isn't as great a medical school, and Santa Clara Valley is maybe not the best for primary care, which is what she's doing right now, as opposed to being a hospitalist working solely in hospital, which is what I do. We're both internal medicine doctors. Our training is similar, but our practice is very different. Sometimes you see a doctor who has a DO, DO meaning Doctor of Osteopathy. Most medical schools in the US are MD schools, allopathic schools, but there's some DO schools. Osteopathy technically comes from a different way of thinking about the body. They learn manipulations of muscles and bones. Practically speaking, however, most of these schools are just for people who didn't get into an allopathic school. And then there's foreign medical graduates. In the US, you have to do residency here to practice here. So every doctor here has been residency trained in the US. However, not all of them have gone to medical school in the US. Dr. Baronia here, for example, has a medical degree from India. Of course, she was raised in India, she got a degree there. And all foreign medical graduates have a medical degree that's MD, not DO. It does make sense that Dr. Baronia had a medical degree in India because she was born there, but a lot of American-born doctors actually have a foreign medical degree because they couldn't get into medical school in the US. I knew one classmate who tried 5 years to get into medical school in the US and he never got in. Finally, he just went to schools outside the US. And if you had to go outside, why wouldn't you go to the Caribbean? Who wouldn't want to go to school here in Grenada? If you do a comparison, the students at Caribbean medical schools are usually a lot weaker to start with and have to be content with bigger class sizes. So you might think logically they're worse, and many of us who graduated from allopathic medical schools in the US do think they're worse, as well as DOs being worse. But they don't have to be. In my residency, the smartest resident was a DO. The attending who was brilliant, he answered every single one of my questions without fail, was a Caribbean medical school graduate. Because those are just statistics, generalizations, and don't speak to the quality of each and every individual. Because everybody is different. They have different reasons for wanting to go to school in the Caribbean. Some may have partied too hard, and now they are changing their ways and going to school in Caribbean, and they're going to work very hard and do very well. Second is your interpersonal interaction. Unfortunately, the vast majority of the time, you don't have a chance to meet the doctor beforehand, so you can't say. But say this was your spouse's doctor, you sat in an appointment. You would have a chance to experience what this doctor is like. Third is other people's experiences with them. Obviously, there's websites that rate doctors. It's much better if you know somebody who's interacted with the doctor. For me, I just ask other doctors what they think of this person. It's a million times more useful than searching online. Fourth is consistency. That's how you figure out mysteries, right? Sherlock catches them in a contradiction. Aha! But more relevant to finding a doctor, what do I mean by consistency? Consistency with something known, something you know for a fact. Early in my training, I went to see my doctor because I had a cough for a month. It seemed like a prolonged period of time. Most likely it was nothing, but I just wanted to get it checked out. The doctor asked me about symptoms, took a look inside my throat, and told me it's viral because of this, this, and this. And I responded by saying, you actually can't say that. You don't know whether it's a virus or bacteria just by looking at me. I knew from my limited training that you can't differentiate viral versus bacterial upper respiratory infections just by looking at somebody. And so what the doctor said was inconsistent with what I knew to be true. Needless to say, I switched doctors. And lastly, but most importantly, willingness to say they don't know they were wrong. This is a story of Kimberly Ho, a nurse, and her mother who had some weird ulcer issue. She went to different doctors over the span of years. Nobody could figure it out. She went to specialists like dermatologists, hematologists, rheumatologists. They suggested medications. They probably said something like, I'm sure this will make you get better. But guess what? She didn't get better. And the solution was just to not go back to those doctors. And I say this only because I have had a lot of experience, but it's actually important to go back to these same doctors and say, hey, you told me that this would make me get better, but I didn't get better. What do we do now? Because if the doctor is good, they'll recognize the inconsistency. They'll say, well, I don't know. They'll be open to suggestions. And this patient's doctors didn't know what Behçet's was when the nurse suggested it. Even he thought it was unlikely because, he just hasn't seen it before, but it's very rare. So he is willing to give it a shot. He tried some medications, he referred her to a rheumatologist, and they finally confirmed this diagnosis, Behçet's. Let's take these lessons we learned and evaluate the validity of Maria van Kerkhove's statement on Monday. Her background's good. She's the head of the Outbreak Investigation Task Force. She worked in the past as a technical consult for WHO for the Middle East respiratory virus. She has degrees from many famous universities. It seems she has great credentials.
Ask WHO. So Maria, what can people do to protect themselves if they're in an area where there's currently an outbreak of COVID?
So thanks, Margaret, for this question. This is a really important question because there's many things that you can do as an individual to protect yourself and to protect your family against this novel coronavirus. The first...
That's as much interpersonal interaction I've had with her. I guess it's about the same for you. Other people's experiences? Unfortunately, Twitter doesn't actually give me a ranking on how trustworthy it is. No fact checks here. Consistency to known information. Fortunately, that's very easy. In her Twitter feed, she linked to the WHO publication on the masks, where they talk about 3 different types of transmission: symptomatic, pre-symptomatic, and asymptomatic. And if you just read the words of the report, you'll see some describe transmission from individuals who didn't have symptoms, meaning asymptomatic transmission. In China, out of 63 asymptomatically infected individuals, there's evidence that 9 or 14% infected other people. So it happens. And I know anybody would say 14% is rare. Sure, there's other studies saying there were none versus there's only pre-symptomatic people, but 1 out of 3 studies wouldn't be no studies. It wouldn't be very rare. Even if you don't know a lot about studies, there's many documents, many websites that break down medical things into simple language, so it's easy to digest it by lay people. And lastly, willingness to admit wrong. This is a Japanese movie called Apology King. This man is a consultant. He teaches people how to apologize. Now, this last point doesn't have much relevance to current validity, but it has relevance to future validity, how trustworthy somebody is, because everybody's wrong sometimes. Most people don't want to admit it. They try to cover it up. They use terms like misunderstood. Let me clarify. Maria said I used the phrase very rare, and I think it's a misunderstanding to say the asymptomatic global transmission is very rare. Let's look at what she actually said.
Individuals actually transmit. So the way that we look at that is we look at these individuals need to be followed carefully over the course of when they're detected and looking at secondary transmission. We have a number of reports from countries who are doing very detailed contact tracing. They're following asymptomatic cases, they're following contacts, and they're not finding secondary transmission onward. It's very rare. And much of that is not published in the literature. From the papers that are published, there's one that came out from Singapore, looking at a long-term care facility. There are some household transmission studies where you follow individuals over time and you look at the proportion of those that transmit onwards. We are constantly looking at this data and we're trying to get more information from countries to truly answer this question. It still appears to be rare that an asymptomatic individual actually transmits onward. What we really...
I think it's pretty clear. She said it was very rare. She just wanted to focus on symptomatic people. She didn't have qualifiers like this only applies in 1 country out of the 200 countries in the world. But she can't say she's wrong. She talks about unpublished data, something other people can't double check. She says it's a misunderstanding, but if you use English and everybody understands you in the exact same way, I'm pretty sure you're the one who's wrong for saying it. Look at what she says. She walked back to those comments. Misunderstanding, we don't have an answer yet. I wasn't saying a policy of the WHO or anything like that. Well, you happen to have a sign in front of you saying WHO technical lead. Not sure how you're supposed to interpret that. You know, Einstein was one of the greatest minds of the 20th century. And he said, the more I learn, the more I realize how much I don't know. And I agree. I think it's always good to be humble. You want to find a doctor who's humble because they realize they don't know something. They seek help. That's what I find most often the issue in the hospital. Doctors who are proud and think they don't need help. Some doctors are stupid. I completely agree. But if they know they need help and they seek it, that's fine. And you want to find a leader, a spokesperson, somebody who's like that as well. Humble. Because it's important determining how much people trust you in the future. Yes, we all make mistakes. We don't know everything. But we should admit it. Even Einstein does.